Hello everyone, welcome to my sewing room. I'm Sarah from This Curly Girl Sews. Today we're going to be sewing a pair of the sunshine shorts. You've purchased your pattern and now I'm going to go through a tutorial on how to sew it together. So thank you for purchasing my pattern. Obviously follow me on my YouTube channel where there'll be other videos, not just the ones for the pattern tutorials. Also I have a Facebook group which is Sew My Wardrobe, that's S-E-W, My Wardrobe, where you can show off all your makes from your patterns. Please follow me on Instagram where I preview some of the up-and-coming patterns of ones I'm developing, ones that are in testing, and obviously I offer discount codes as the patterns are launched as well for the first few days. So we'll start by just running through the pattern pieces for the sunshine shorts. So when you cut all your fabric pieces out of your pattern and you lay your pattern on it, all the seam allowances are actually included in the pattern where they're needed. So you basically just cut the pattern pieces exactly as the line per your size on the piece of paper, and all the seam allowance will already be there for you. So I'm going to start by just running through all the pattern pieces to make sure you've got everything cut out. So the first one is front A. You need to cut this 1+1. So 1+1 means you cut the piece on a folded piece of fabric so that you end up with two pieces that mirror one another. So you can see there, my two pieces mirror one another. So that's both the fronts. You do the same with the back as well. Cut 1+1. So you have one and a mirror with the other one. So that's both the backs. So the pockets, you cut 2+2 because obviously you have a pocket either side. So you need 2 for one side and 2 for the other side. So you have 2, which makes that pocket, and then 2, which makes the other pocket the other side. You then have D, belt loops, which you just need to cut 1, because what you're going to do is you're going to make a big long belt loop and then cut it into 5. And then E, the tie belt, copy 2 of these, because you're actually going to join it at the back. You can do it in one piece, but obviously then you need a huge length of fabric. So to keep the fabric to a minimum, I put a join in the back. So you need 2 pieces of E, the tie belt, which are going to stitch together into a long belt. So that's all you need. So what is it? 1, 2, 5 pieces in total. So you should have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 pieces of fabric in total that I'm going to show you now how to stitch together. In addition to your fabric, once you've cut it out, you're also going to need some 4cm elastic, which is long enough to go around your waist. You will need to stretch it a tiny bit so that obviously the garment actually clings to your body and is not completely loose. But if you, as a rough guide, cut it to the measurement around your waist. You're also going to need a safety pin, because you're going to thread the elastic through the waistband using the safety pin. You also might need something to turn your belt in the right way. So something long and pointed, maybe a knitting needle or some forceps or something similar, just to turn your tie belt in the right way once you've stitched it. So let's get going. So the first step is to take your front A pieces and your C pocket pieces, and what you're going to do is actually match up the notches on the sides of your pocket and the side of your front piece A. So I've got the right side of my front piece A facing up. This is the right side of my pocket piece C, which I'm going to lay down on top of my piece A, and I'm going to match up the notch on the side seam of piece A to the pocket notch on the side there, so that the pocket is facing in. There will be a gap at the top here, which is going to be where you fold the waistband over. So don't worry about the pocket looking like it's sitting quite low. Basically, it needs to be that low. So just match up the notches on the side and do that on both sides. And what you're going to do is then pin down through there so that the right sides of the fabric are facing one another. Same on both sides, and then you're going to stitch down through both sides with your 1 centimetre seam allowance. So the first thing we're going to do is stitch the pocket to the front, right sides together, matching up the notches. So using your 1 centimetre seam allowance, just stitch, straight stitch all the way down through the side. And do that on the other side, front side as well, with the other pocket. Again, right sides together, 1 centimetre seam allowance. What you want to do now is actually press that seam flat. So now you have your 2 pocket pieces sewn to your 2 front pieces, and you've pressed that seam open. You set that aside and you take your 2 other pocket pieces and your back pieces and do exactly the same. So open out your 2 back pieces so that you have the right sides facing up. Then take your pocket piece with the right side facing down, so you put the right sides together down on top of one another, and then you line up the notch on the side of the side seam of the back, right side, to the notch on the pocket, and again pin that in place down through the side. Again, there will be a gap at the top, which is again for the waistband to fold over. So do the same on the other side. So again, the notch there. So match up the notch on the pocket with the notch cut there on the side back, right sides together, and pin those in place, right side of the pocket to the right side of the back. So once you've pinned those 2 pockets in place, you're going to stitch the pocket to the back. So like we did with the front pieces, with the pocket and back right side together, matching up the notches on the side, we're going to stitch using the 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way down the length of the side seam of the pocket. And we're then going to repeat that on the other side. So that's both sides done. So now you're going to open up that seam and press that seam flat on both pieces. So you now have completed front and back pieces with a pocket attached. So you take your back piece, which is B, with the attached pocket, with the right side facing upwards, and then you take your corresponding front piece A with the right side, which is not the one with the seam on, facing down, and place that on top. And what you need to do is line up the top there, which will automatically line up your pocket pieces, and also down to the bottom there. Just carefully line all that up. And what you're going to do is actually pin down through the side seam. What you need to be careful of here is that where the seam where you've stitched the pocket on both pieces lines up exactly on top of one another, because you're going to run your next seam down just to the inside of that seam, so that when you open it out you won't be able to see the seam. So if you pin from the top down through the side seam to the pocket, and then you actually need to pin down to that notch. So you need to make sure, so just feel underneath where the heaviness of the seam is there, and you need to pin just a couple millimeters just to the inside of that seam. And then when you stitch it, you won't see, when you open it out, you won't see any of the seam from the pocket. That makes the pocket basically inseam. You're going to do exactly the same on the bottom of the side. So again, line up these pockets, feel to line up the weight of the seam with your fingers so that they're exactly in line. And then you're going to go just 2 centimeters, so just under an inch above the bottom of that stitching, so to about there. I'll put a pin in there, that's where you're going to start sewing. And then again, just slightly to the inside of that so that you don't actually see it. Make sure it's the same on the back. And then you're going to pin down through the rest of the side seam right to the bottom. And then you're going to stitch from the top to the notch. So maybe put a pin across so that you make sure you don't sew further than the notch. So you're going to stitch down to the notch there. Then you're going to leave a gap, which is going to be where your hand goes into the pocket. And then you're going to stitch from 2 centimeters above the top of the stitching where you've marked with the pin, all the way down to the bottom with your 1 centimeter seam allowance. And you're going to do that on both sides. So you're going to do that with that leg, and then you're going to do exactly the same on the other leg. So you carefully stitch down through the side. Then I've come to the side of the pocket, and you just need to make sure you just stitch slightly to the inside, not the pocket side of that stitch line, and just stitch down to the notch like that. Just lock off those few stitches with a couple of back stitches, then leave a gap, move down to where you've marked with the pin to start, put your needle in just slightly to the body side of that stitch line. Make sure your pocket is flat and pulled out the other side, so you're only stitching the front and back pieces. And again, lock those first few stitches and then stitch all the way down through the side with your 1 centimeter seam allowance. And you then need to repeat that on the other side as well. So you now have 2 completed side seams. You now need to sew the inside legs. Now you'll notice that the back piece is slightly wider than the front piece. So what you need to do is just pull them so that they line up. And then you have the leg. So what you need to do is pin down through the inside leg on both legs, and then you're going to stitch both the inside leg seams. So they're both pinned. You're now going to stitch both the inside leg seams with 1 centimetre seam allowance. So you've now stitched both the inside legs. Sorry, I didn't video that, but basically it's a straight line on both inside legs. You're now going to close the pocket bags. So you need to pin right sides together, the pocket all the way around. So all the way around the curve. You don't need to bother with the top because that's going to get closed when you make the waistband. With your pins, pin around the edge of the pocket bag. Like so, make sure it's flat, and then stitch around where I've pinned. And do that with both pockets. So what you need to do to start is make sure that that side seam is just pushed out of the way so that you're just sewing the pocket bag. So it'll just be the double layer of the pocket at the bottom there. So literally put your needle in on the edge. And then this is quite tricky, so take it slowly. Using your 1 centimetre seam allowance, sew around the curve of the pocket bag. So let the machine just guide slowly around the curve. This is the trickiest part of the shorts, sewing this curve. Just take it nice and slow and just spin the fabric. So spin it with this hand, your left hand, just guide it around that curve. So right to the top, and then repeat for the other pocket piece. So you now have 2 completed legs with pockets, completed pockets attached. If you put your hand in your pocket, you can feel, obviously, the pocket bag works. So next, you need to sew around this curve. So taking your back pieces on top, the legs are inside out, you need to match up right sides together the notch, the large notch there on the back curve. So match that up and pin that together. So go down then to the inside legs, and where you've got the seam for the inside leg, you need to again match up the seams like that on the inside, put them together, and then put a pin so that those seams exactly match. Then move around to the front, right sides together again, and match up the notches on the curve there as well. Then go to the top by the waist, match up that, put a pin in there, and then go back to the waist at the top of the back and put a pin matching the top there as well. Then you need to pin the whole of the rest of the curve all the way around, and careful to make sure you match up the curve at the bottom between the notches. Go around and do the same on the front curve. Right to the top of the waistband, just matching up the edges. So now you have completely pinned around that curve. You can see there, it's completely pinned around the curve. You're now going to stitch all the way around that curve. Once you've stitched all the way around that curve once, what you're going to do then is between the notches, you're going to put a second row of stitching, 1 millimetre or 2 towards the edge of the seam from the first row of stitching, which is actually just going to act as a reinforcement stitch, so that it's basically sewn round twice where the stress point is. So starting at the waistband, you're using your 1 centimetre seam allowance, stitch all the way around the curve. You'll need to be quite careful going around between the notches, just to make sure that the fabric is not puckered or pleated or anything underneath. So make sure you keep it dead flat. So keep smoothing out underneath, making sure it's flat. Then once you've done that first row of stitching, go back to where your notch is, and then you have your first row of stitching there. Sorry, my thread is the same colour as my fabric, which is not very good for you to see. And then your second row of stitching, just a couple millimetres inside of that. So you have your first row of stitching there. You want to do the next row of stitching just a couple millimetres inside of that. So the first row of stitching is just here. You can see. What I'm going to do is put the needle just 1 millimetre or 2, just a fraction of an inch towards the seam allowance. So it's between that row of stitching and the seam allowance, but a couple of mil from that row of stitching, just to reinforce all the way around that curve between the notches. So as you can see, I've just done a double row of stitching all the way around between the notches of the crotch seam, just to reinforce that seam where it will take the maximum stress. So you now have something that's starting to look like a pair of shorts. So the next step is to turn 1 centimetre of the waistband. So if you get your shorts inside out, basically turn 1 centimetre of the waistband over to the inside of the shorts. So where the seam is to the inside, so the right side, you can't see anything. And then you're just going to press or iron 1 centimetre seam allowance of the shorts. It's probably a good idea to press all the other seams at the same time whilst you're at the ironing board. Once you've done the 1 centimetre, you're also then going to turn over another 6 centimetres and press that as well. So you've got 1 centimetre, press it all the way around the waistband, 6 centimetres, there to there, press it all the way around the waistband as well. So I've ironed over the 1 centimetre and 6 centimetre at the waistband. You may have noticed I also overlocked all my seams because my fabric was fraying horrendously. It's a linen look cotton fabric, but it's just frays horrendously. So I just overlocked some of the seams on it. So now you need to fold over the waistband and pin it in place. Now, what I would do first of all is take your pockets and make sure that they are to your front piece, because otherwise you'll end up with your pockets going backwards and you want them obviously to go forwards. So you look at the crotch area, and the one with the longer seam and the one with the higher back is the back of your trousers. You can also tell from the bottom as well, because the leg is very marginally wider on the back than it is the front. And what you need to do is get your pocket so that it's flat, and I would actually just pop a pin in the pocket just to make sure they're to the front. So again, make sure they're flat to that front piece, and then just pop a pin or two in there just to make sure that the pockets stay at the front. So turn over your waistband, and then you need to pin around the folded edge. You may need to ease it a little at the back, because obviously the back is at a slight angle. So you may just need to ease the fabric just to make sure that it is even all the way around. At the front, make sure you catch in the top of that pocket so that the pocket stays in place, and make sure the pocket is flat to the seam. So literally pin all the way around, and once you've pinned all the way around, then you're going to stitch using an edge stitch. So edge stitch all the way around the waistband, except you're going to leave a gap. So literally pin all the way around the waistband. At the centre back, you're going to need a small gap, because that's where you're going to thread the elastic. So once you get to the centre back, your elastic, so basically ease that round, so slightly pull the fabric just so that it goes in flat. Now at the back, your elastic is 4 centimetres wide, so you need a gap that's going to be 4 centimetres wide to get your elastic in. So you can take your elastic, or you can measure a couple centimetres either side of the back. It's easier just to take the elastic and then just put a pin where you want to start and stop. So pin either side of the elastic, like that. So pin either side of the elastic where you want to start and stop. So starting at the first pin marker, you need to just stitch close to the edge stitch, all the way around. So you have your 1 centimetre fold there, your 6 centimetre fold there, and what you're doing is making a channel for the elastic. So at the back you need to ease it very slightly, so gently, not too much, gently just pull the fabric so that it's flat, and then just edge stitch all the way around the waistband. and you will catch in the pocket on the front as well. And go all the way around the back until you come to the pin and stitch to where the pin is, and that will leave a gap there for the elastic to be threaded. You then need to sew another channel all the way around to make a channel for the elastic so it doesn't move around. So you need to measure 3 centimeters so that the elastic isn't tight in that channel. It stays in place, but it's not tight so that it's pulling at all. So measure 3 centimeters or 1 1/4 inches away from your first row of stitching, and that should leave a few millimeters either side. Now you can either do this with, I have a auto fade pen for fabric, which basically it disappears with water. So I can draw a line, stitch on that line, and then I just literally spray a bit of water on it and it disappears. You can either use that or you can use a row of pins. So I'm going to use centimeters because I'm metric, I'm afraid. So I'm just going to put a pin 3 centimeters from that first row of stitching. So you don't actually need that bit of elastic anymore. So literally just go all the way around. So 3 centimeters from the stitching, not from the edge. So from that row of stitching, 3 centimeters, another pin. 3 centimeters, another pin. And do that all the way around the waistband. You have to make sure that you don't make it less than 3 centimeters. So I would use the tape measure and then just literally at the end of the tape measure, put the pin. So 3 centimeters. And once you've pinned or marked with your pen or tailor's chalk, however you want to do it, you can actually then stitch all the way around. See how easy a pen is? You literally just draw a line at the end of the... So that's the 2 ways you can do it. And then you're basically just going to stitch all the way along between the pins in a straight line all the way around. So don't leave a gap, just go all the way around the waist. So then once you've marked your 3 centimeter channel, you need to stitch carefully along that line. Don't go inside that line because you don't want to make the channel too small for your elastic. So literally stitch the whole way around the waistband. You do need to make sure that you keep your waistband dead flat. And that's your channel for your elastic completed. Next is the belt loops. So the next thing is to make the belt loops. So you take your pattern piece D, the belt loops, which is this one here. If I open it back out again, I'll show you how I did it. So you've got pattern piece D. What I did was folded it in half lengthways like that, pressed it, then open it back out and then fold the edge, each edge to the middle so that you end up with like that, and then fold it in half again. So if I demonstrate with a piece of paper, it's probably easier. So you're folding your belt loops in half like that, then you're opening it back out and then folding one side to the middle, and then the other side to the middle, like that. So you then have a strip that's half the width, and then you fold that on itself again. So you have your sides folded to the middle, and then you fold over again to make a narrow strip, and it is 1/4 of the width of the original strip. What you're going to do with this strip then, press it obviously. It's easier to press as you go, so press it in half and then press each of the flaps in and then press it in half again. You're going to edge stitch all the way down the open edge, so that it takes those together, so all the way down that one, and then you're going to, on the folded edge stitch all the way down that one as well. So you then need to cut this into 5 belt loops. So the length of the strip is just over 30 centimetres, so you need to cut it into 6 centimetre lengths. So you've got a pencil, get a pencil and mark basically 6 centimetres like that, or 2.5 inches. Actually, sorry, 2.25 inches. So 2.25 inches or 6 centimetres. Once you've marked one, you can actually just cut that and use that length for the others. So take that, so 6 centimetres or 2.25 inches. Basically cut this strip into 5 belt loops. So it's 4, last one, oops. So there you have your 5 belt loops ready to be stitched on. So turn your shorts the right way round, and you need the back facing up. So what you're going to do is measure where the belt loops need to go. So you need to go 10 centimetres from the side seam. So if you get the side seam and measure 10 centimetres from the side seam, just mark it at the moment. You're going to pin on your belt loop in a second, and then make sure you only go through one there. And then from the other side, 10 centimetres or 3 3/4 inches from the side seam, and again just pop a pin to mark the position. So the first belt loop is going to be in the centre. So what you need to do is just turn over 1 centimetre at the end, like that, or 3/8 of an inch. Turn over the end of the belt loop, and then you're going to put that face down just above the stitch line in the centre back, and you're going to pin that in place. It's going through quite a few layers, so it's a bit tricky, so careful you don't stab your finger. And the same the other end, just turn under the end just below where the stitch line will be. You're going to do the same where you've marked the sides. So fold over the very end, no more than 1 centimetre, and just above the stitch line, pin it in place, and same the other side, just below the stitch line, pin it in place. And the same this side. Tiny on or just above the stitch line. Same at the bottom. Just below the stitch line or on the stitch line. So that's the back ones in place. So turn over your shorts and now measure 20 centimetres or 8 inches from the centre front. So 20 centimetres. And put a pin, or 8 inches, and put a pin. So that's where the final 2 belt loops are going to go. So exactly the same. Turn over the very end of the belt loop, pin just on or above the stitch line, and on or below the bottom stitch line. When you stitch these, what you don't want to do is interfere at all with that elastic channel, because that would interfere potentially with how the elastic is going to thread through. So it needs to be on or just outside the stitch line. Best thing to do, I think, is to have the belt loop very slightly above the stitch line and then pin on the stitch line and stitch on the stitch line. So once you have them all pinned in place, you need to carefully sew all the belt loops on. Right, so you need to carefully sew these belt loops on. So I would actually put the foot on the belt loop so that it's got something to grip on, and then carefully sew in place, going backwards and forwards. So I've done it, as you can see, just on the stitch line for the channel. So again, at the bottom of the belt loop, remove the pin, put the foot down on the belt loop, and then stitch forward, back, over the end, and then forward to the middle again. And do that for all the belt loops. Put the foot down, take the pin out, start stitching in the middle of the belt loop, forward, past the end, back, past the end, and forward to the middle again. And repeat for all the belt loops. So now all the belt loops are sewn on and in place. What you need to do now is put your elastic through the elastic channel. So what you need to do is measure your elastic to your waistband, to your waist, sorry. So you need to put it round your waist, stretch it a small amount, make sure it overlaps and it's comfortable, and then cut it to the right length. I would suggest maybe putting the elastic round without stretching it, so it fits your waist, moving back about 8 centimetres or 2.5 inches, and then seeing how that stretch feels, and that should be roughly about the right length. What you need to do then is thread it through the channel. So take your safety pin, put your safety pin through one end, and then through the back, centre back hole in the channel, thread your elastic into the channel. And you need to thread this all the way through the channel. Just push the safety pin through and ease the elastic into the channel. When you get around to the second half of the waist, you need to make sure that the safety pin goes to the back of all the layers of fabric. So on the back, the pocket, make sure the safety pin is behind all those layers of fabric. You need to do that to get it through the side seam. Otherwise the pin will get stuck. So once you've gone all the way around, you need to carefully ease the pin and the elastic out of the channel. Make sure that you haven't twisted the elastic at all the way around. And make sure you don't let that first end go back into the channel, because you'll have to do it again. Take the safety pin off, overlap the elastic by about 1.5 centimetres or 2 centimetres, and then put your pin in the elastic. You can then just try on your shorts just to make sure the elastic is the right length. If it's the right length, then what you can do is pull the elastic out so that you can see it, and then you're going to sew where the safety pin was. So overlap, and then you're going to sew straight stitch, zigzag line, and then a straight line, so that there's a little bit of give, but it's not going to rip apart. So pull your elastic out of the channel a little bit, and then overlap your elastic by about that much, so 1.5 centimetres, 2 centimetres, so about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then using your zigzag stitch on about a 4.5 width, 1.5 length, zigzag down through the elastic and back the other way. I would also do a straight stitch down either side, just to reinforce it so it doesn't come apart. And then that's your elastic sewn together. You then just need to ease the elastic back into the channel. You then need to take that gap and sew it. You'll be sewing over the belt loop, so be a bit careful. And you just need to sew a straight stitch along that gap, and that's the waistband done. So the final bit on the actual shorts itself is to do the hem. Now, depending on whether you're doing turn-ups or not, there's obviously a slightly different method. I'll cover off not turn-ups to start with. So if you've cut the shorts slightly shorter along the hemline line rather than the pattern line, what you need to do is turn up to the inside 1 centimetre and press it, and then turn up another 2 centimetres and press it. And then what you're going to do is pin that all the way around and actually stitch all the way around or with an edge stitch to secure that line of that hem in place, and then your short hem is finished. You need to do that on both legs. However, if you're doing turn-ups, you need to do them slightly differently. So again, you need to turn over the 1 centimetre to the inside and press all the way around both legs. But then you need to turn up 5 centimetres, so it's a much bigger hem, again to the inside, and press. Once you've done that, you pin all the way around that 5 centimetre hem and then stitch all the way around both legs. So I've pressed the 1 centimetre hem and then the 5 centimetre hem. So then you need to just pin around the 5 centimetre hem to the inside of the short. So you're doing it like a normal hem, you're just doing a giant hem basically. So pin that all the way around both legs, and then you're just going to stitch around the hem on both legs. So you're going to stitch around both these legs now. So starting at the inside leg seam, just line up the hem. You may need to just ease it in very slightly, so just gently pull it just to make sure it's flat. And you're going to sew all the way around the leg of the shorts. Once you've done one, then you're going to repeat that on the other side. So I've now hemmed around both the legs with the giant hem, 5 centimetre hem. So what you need to do now is turn your shorts in the right way. And then you're going to measure 3 centimetres or 1.25 inches, I think it is. Yep, 1.25 inches. So 3 centimetres or 1.25 inches, you're going to basically fold to the outside your legs. And what you need to do then is actually press that seam. So just roughly pin it so that it's 3 centimetres. But you are going to need to just press it in place, and then once you've pressed it all the way around, what you're going to do is, once you've pinned it all the way around and pressed it really well, you then need to just, in that seam there, in that ditch of that seam basically, just put a few stitches just to catch that turn up in place, and do exactly the same on the inside leg. So turn up 3 centimetres, press, and then just a row of stitches, maybe 10-15 stitches, just up through that to secure that in place. And that should be enough to actually hold your turn up in place. And that's basically your turn up's finished. Do that on both sides, obviously. So I've sewn the sides and the inside leg just on there, on the turn up, to secure that. So they're secured basically at both sides. If you find that your turn up is constantly coming down, you may just want to put a little stitch just in the front as well, just a hand stitch just to keep it in place. But pressing it should keep the turn up in place. So all that's left to do now is to make the belt. So your tie belt is basically in 2 halves. You have 2 pieces. So you need to attach 2 of the short ends together. So pin that like that and stitch along there. And then once you've done that, just press that seam open. You then need to fold it in half lengthways. So you fold it in half like that all the way along, pin it, and then stitch all the way along. Leave a gap about 20 centimetres or so from the end of about 10 centimetres, but stitch the ends square, or if you want them angled, do them angled, which looks quite attractive. But leave a 10 centimetre gap about 20 centimetres from one end, because you'll need to turn it in the right way from one end. So I've sewn my 2 halves together there with a join. I've then folded it in half and stitched all the way along, although I have left a gap there. Left a gap of about 10 centimetres or so, about 3 inches, so that I can turn my belt. Now I also curved, as you can see, my stitching at the end like that. So just curved it off rather than square. I just curved it just to give a slightly different finish. If I cut it, you'll be able to see the shape a bit easier. Just to give a different shape to the end of my belt. So I'm just going to trim back the seam allowance now so that when I turn it, there'll be nice points at the end. So just trim back that point. Same if you do the square end, you just need to cut off the corner so that when you turn it, it goes into a nice point. So what you need to do now is turn this. Now I use forceps because I can put the forceps inside right to the end and then just turn it like that. And you can put the forceps inside and just pull it through and then use the point to actually just ease the point of the belt out. So that's one end. I then need to do the other end. So again, just put the forceps inside, start to pull it through. The first bit is the hardest bit. Once you get it going, it's fine. So then you just need to make a gap for the forceps. Pull it through. And you can use a long pointed knitting needle or something similar. Once you turn your belt in the right way, which is a laborious task and takes a while, you then need to press it really well, which I have already done here. You have one small opening there that you just need to slip stitch and hand sew. I'm really sorry, I know I hate hand sewing as well, but yeah, just a little 10cm gap just in the belt to hand sew, and then thread your belt through your belt loops. And your shorts are ready to wear. That's your sunshine shorts finished. I hope you enjoyed sewing them, and I hope you'll enjoy wearing them even more than you enjoyed sewing them. These were obviously the blue ones that I showed you at the start, and as you can see, the blue ones are a little bit shorter. What I did, I actually shortened the pattern just by about 3 centimetres to get a slightly shorter pair. So again with turn-ups, so the process is exactly the same. I just cut off 3 centimetres off the bottom of the pattern piece to make them slightly shorter. So these have a 6 centimetre inside leg, so they're little short shorts, whereas these have a 9 centimetre inside leg, so they're not quite so short. So it depends on what look you're going for. There are a lot of options with this pattern as well. You could leave off the belt loops and leave off the belt, so literally just have an elasticated waist. You could not make the belt like I did with the blue ones, but I put belt loops on so you could actually wear it with a belt. So lots of different ways you can wear these. You could leave the pockets out if you felt that you didn't want to do the pockets, but lots and lots of options, and I absolutely adore both my pairs. Thank you for buying my pattern. I hope you support my other patterns that I'm going to be releasing soon too. Obviously, access my social media links. My Instagram, This Curly Girl Sews. I show all my patterns that I've made on there. I also showcase upcoming patterns so that you can get sneak previews of what I'm working on and what I've got planned in the future. I also offer discounts through my Facebook group, which is Sew My Wardrobe. That's SEW, My Wardrobe. So please join that as well, so I can see how you've made your sunshine shorts. That's hard to say. I'd love to see you wearing them. I'd love to see what fabrics you use and what you do with them. So join my Facebook group and follow me on Instagram. Thank you for buying the pattern again, and I hope to see you soon. Happy sewing!